Christmas is less than a week away, and whether or not you celebrate the holiday, no doubt at some point you have seen an image of Christ. In fact, some of the depictions of Jesus most familiar to Americans were created right here in Chicago. Here's the story on the Artbeat.
Do you recognize this man? His name is Warner Sallman. In 1924, the Art Institute of Chicago graduate and commercial artist created this image now called Head of Christ. It is on exhibit in the Billy Graham Center at Wheaton College.
Mr. Sallman did about over 500 oils, and he did pastels, he did chalks, he did landscapes, he did portraits, but he's best known for the Head of Christ. He had done other things prior to 1924, but he was a volunteer director of art for what was then called the Covenant Companion. It was a youth magazine for the Evangelical Covenant Church. And he, Mr. Sallman, had to come up with something for that February issue.
Struggling to create an image for his deadline, Sallman says he fell asleep and the vision of Christ came. He drew the image and called it Son of Man. It was first drawn in charcoal and later an oil painting on canvas with a white background. But Sallman's most famous Christ painting was done in 1940. He depicts Jesus illuminated over a brown background. Sallman entitled it Head of Christ.
Warner Sallman, although he's not a well-known name in either art circles or even church circles, has contributed so substantially to the church language, especially in the 20th century. These are images that many of us are familiar with, but we don't associate with Sallman's name. We've seen it in Bibles, on prayer or memorial cards. We've seen it hanging on walls.
Sallman's Head of Christ received unexpected popularity. It's estimated that it's been copied more than 500 billion times. The Evangelical Covenant Church hired him to present chalk talks of his Christ image in schools and churches throughout the country. The Head of Christ became iconic and known as the American Jesus.
He was just a part of the whole Protestantism, and the Catholic Church too. He did portraits for First Methodist Church in downtown Chicago. Here you see he had his picture on the cover of Christian Life. Here you see on the cover of the Covenant Companion, April 21st, 1967. And then you see down on the left there the Head of Christ, and that's the size of the wallet size that Mr. Sallman painted, and this was given to the soldier men and women in the Second World War.
As a result of the war, people around the world came face to face with the Head of Christ. Sallman's work was honored even after his death in 1968. But in spite of the popularity of the image, there was criticism from art critics, clergy, and cultural historians.
Sallman's been criticized for painting a Jesus that is passive. He's been criticized that maybe his Jesus is too Caucasian. But Sallman was a Swedish commercial artist living in Chicago, and he painted a Jesus that is close at hand and can be related to.
Even today, we would not say it's normative, but it is one image that Mr. Sallman came up with. But it was meaningful to people. Amidst the vicissitudes and the heartaches of life, this became their Jesus.
This 8 by 10 foot Head of Christ painting, done in 1956, was displayed in the Edgewater Covenant Church until 10 years ago, when a new congregation purchased the church.
The church was sold to a Hispanic group, and they frankly didn't want this image. And someone inquired and said, well, what are you going to do with it? And they said, well, we'll probably get rid of it or put it in the alley or something like that. Now, that was kind of startling to the people at that time, and so it was rescued, so to speak.
That action set Carlson on a mission around the country to rescue many of Sallman's more than 500 paintings.
This art should not be lost. And I knew that the last generation or two, they were forgetting about Mr. Sallman. In the 40s, 50s, 60s, and so on, some of the 70s, you would see a lot of Mr. Sallman's art. But now you won't, and you wouldn't. it became obvious to me that his art was being stored in storerooms and attics and basements and this type of thing. And I did not want that to happen. This image, Christ in Gethsemane, was painted by Mr. Sallman in 1940. And he copied Johann Heinrich Hoffmann, who painted the original in 1890. And you can find the original at the Riverside Church in New York City, a gift of John D. Rockefeller. In this image, the Christ faces to the left. And then later on, Mr. Sallman painted his own, and he had Christ facing to the right.
In addition to finding Sallman's Jesus art in churches and homes, Carlson found pieces in the F.M. Johnson Archive at North Park University. Photos, memorabilia, and the 1924 Son of Man image on the Covenant Companion magazine are just a few of the items borrowed from the archive and included in the Wheaton College exhibition.
Some of these pieces have never been shown in public before, so this is a unique gathering of material. We hope that it causes people to consider how they relate to Jesus.
The exhibit, Face to Face, Warner Sallman's Images of Christ, will be at Wheaton College through May 15th. More information on our website.